Change your thoughts based upon the wisdom of the Tao, and your life will change. There's many principles to live by in the Tao. First, remind yourself that there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. Bring happiness to all that you do. You accomplish much by trying less. It's so inconsistent, isn't it, with what we lived in the Western world. But the less you try, when I go out and swim in the ocean, and I do it almost every day, I try to do between 30 minutes and an hour every day, being out there in that ocean. And I just get out there, and if I try less, my arms just seem to know what to do, and the breathing just all works, and and I can swim all day. As soon as I try, as soon as I struggle, as soon as I try, the minute that I move myself into trying, it's like if I were to take this little cap here and drop it right there and say, I'm going to try to pick this up. I'm going to try to pick this up. This is what Lao Tzu was speaking about. So all of this, I'm trying, I'm really trying. All of this is called, in reality, not picking it up. That's what that's called, not picking it up. But when I just get easy and do less. See yourself, the Tao says, in everyone you encounter. A great lesson. Every single being, especially the ones that we read about who we're told are our enemies. See yourself in them. Know that whoever they are, wherever they live, they want what we want. They want what I want. They want to be at peace. They don't want to be always struggling. They don't want to be sick. They just want to be loved, whoever they are. I know the skepticism of that. It's like, yes, but, all of the yes, buts. But if they got it too, see, Lao Tzu wasn't speaking to, well, some are going to get this and some probably won't. He was speaking to all of us. Trust in others, the Tao says, to know what's best for themselves. Trust in that. Trust in the pliability, the flexibility of your babies. God, those little babies, they're so great when they're like, 2 weeks old. You can take their foot, put it behind their neck, stick it around here like this, put it in their mouth. They're so flexible. I mean, you can do anything. You pick them up, you turn them upside down. You watch them when they're starting to learn to walk, and they run, crash, they go down into the walls and all of this, and you think, oh my God, this kid will never walk again. Up they go, and they don't. Trust in their flexibility. Live without attachment and be generous. Be strong by bending. By bending. We need to learn this in our lives. We need to learn this in the world. It's not so important to be right. It's so much more important when you have a choice to be right or to be kind. Always pick kind. Always pick kind. Practice radical humility. Live low. Live low like the ocean. Stay low. And all the streams will come to it. That's why it's so powerful. Because it doesn't lord anything over anyone. And rather than looking for miracles, see everything as miraculous. Everything in your life. There was a man who had a Tao experience, what I call a quantum moment. His name was John Newton. He lived back in the beginning of the 18th century. And he was crossing the ocean. He was a slave trader. He had a ship full of human cargo that he was going to trade into slavery in the most hideous practice that was so common at that time in our history. And in the middle of a storm, on his way over there with all of these people, he was 22 years old or 23 years old. And he thought he was going to die, and he thought it was like he must have hit a hurricane or something out there that was before satellites could warn people. And while he thought he was in that state of dying, he took out a pencil and a paper, and he wrote on the back of an envelope, he wrote, I once was lost, and now I'm found. And it was grace. It was grace that taught my heart to feel. It was grace that brought me home. And when the storm was over, he had a moment. He reconnected to his source. Anybody out there can reconnect to the source, to the Tao, and become a being of Tao. Remember, it's a return trip. And you can make that return trip while you're alive. Remember the parrot. He knows much more than we did. And he returned back to Africa, and he released the slaves, it is said, And for the next 55 years of his life, he shifted and became the most ardent spokesman as an abolitionist to abolish that hideous practice of slavery. That's what he devoted his life to it. A former slave. It's like going from Saul to Paul, you know, from being a person who crucifies and murders Christians to being the author of a big portion of the New Testament as St. Paul. In a moment, it's possible for any of us. I close this beautiful presentation on the Tao, Cecilia, with a poem that was written by a woman. Her name is Naomi Long Madgett. She's from Detroit, went to Wayne State University. She was named the Poet Laureate of Detroit, an acclaimed African-American poet. Listen to these words. It sums up all that I've been saying. I wouldn't coax the plant if I were you. Such watchful nurturing may do it harm. Let the soil rest from so much digging, and wait until it's dry before you water it. The leaf's inclined to find its own direction. Give it a chance to seek the sunlight for itself. Much growth is stunted by too careful prodding, too eager tenderness. The things we love, we have to learn to leave alone. Thank you.
I went through a couple of quotes. One was from Valerie Hunt's book, The Infinite Mind, which is the display quote for the 6th chapter of Spiritual Solution. She said, "But I do not believe that man can perceive his godlike qualities until his field reaches higher and higher vibrations and attains a greater degree of coherency. No matter how hard we may try to receive spiritual guidance, we cannot until our fields are attuned to that vibrational system called God." Let me share that with you again. "But I do not believe that man can perceive his godlike qualities until his field reaches higher and higher vibrations and attains a greater degree of coherency." So that you can sit there in anger and in fear and in shame and all of the reactions in your life that compute to make you weak, and that will make sense shortly. And you can never come to know God according to the mind field theory that Dr. Hunt espouses and talks about, and according to a spiritual solution to every problem. Because when you're not at peace, you have sent your body into a vibrational field of energy in which you have allowed your mind to create the error or the illusion that you and God are no longer connected. And that begins to take over. And as hard as you may try, and no matter what you may do, until you can raise the frequency at which you vibrate, until you can raise the energy level at which you experience life, and move out of the lower and slower frequencies and into the higher frequencies, you will not be able to access and negotiate the presence of a spiritual solution to your problems.
You see, the intellect has trouble with this, because the intellect is the mind and the mind is the ego. If you ask most people, where is your center? Where are you centered? They will point to their head. Where do you originate from? Where is your source? Where is your ability to think and to process? They will point to their head, and they will say, it's in my brain. My brain is what makes me be able to think and be able to understand concepts and so on. If you ask a spiritual being, where is your source? Where is your center? What is it that gives you the ability to understand these great miraculous things? They will point to their heart. And so, heart consciousness is very different than head consciousness. The head consciousness is one which tries to analyze it, tries to figure it out, and has a great deal of difficulty with it because it's coming from this position of separateness. The heart is your intuition. The heart is the part of you that says, I know and I trust and it works for me and I don't have to convince anyone else of it. And once you have this, even prayer becomes not like, most people think of prayer as like, God is like this huge vending machine in the sky, all right? And I put in my tokens, and I behave in a certain way, and certain things are going to come to me. But there's an authentic kind of prayer that is very different than this. And this kind of prayer is one in which your prayer is in communion with God, rather than separation from. I turn it over to this higher part, but it's not something that I'm ever separate from. That's trust. That kind of trust, in combination with knowing that you're no longer afraid of being God. Know ye that ye are gods, and I am in you, and you are in me, and I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. It's like this is something that we are being taught, and yet we have been conditioned almost to subscribe to another idea which says that I am not trustworthy, I am separate from, I can't do those things. That has to be transcended. You have to understand that in terms of people using it to give fear to you. And our greatest fear is the fear that we're going to be alone, that we're going to be abandoned. But this universal intelligence that is everywhere, this divine intelligence that is universal, that is in all things, how can it abandon us? Wherever we go, it's there. When you trust in that and know it without any doubt, you begin to see it everywhere. You see it in the flowers. You see it in the sunsets. You see it in your babies and in your mother-in-law. You see it in all places. And what you're doing when you see it is you're recognizing that I am worthy, and I am important, and I am significant. Yes, I am connected to God. I am what God is doing. And that's the subject of the next person. Honoring your worthiness to receive. Thank you.
So I was finishing up the function run, and I saw a couple that I recognized over the years, and there was a woman, and she was having difficulty with her luggage, and I just said to her, "Oh, here, let me help you with that." And she gave me a real harsh look and said, "No, I don't want any help." And I said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Because one of her suitcases, she had two suitcases, and one was going one direction, and the other." I said, "Here, let me help you with that." "I don't want any help from you, especially from you." And it gave me that real harsh.
Wow.
Okay. So this happened an hour ago. and so it's like, and I have no idea what prompted. This is just someone I've just seen around the place where I live once in a while. It's a building where a lot of people live. And so the reason I bring it up is because at the moment that something like this occurs, when you encounter, someone who's hostile towards you, or who's sending you an ugly message, or there's any number of endless reasons about why that might be taking place. It might have to do with something that I did or said or whatever that I'm not even aware of. It might have something to do with something that's going on in this person's life at this particular time. It could be her husband was walking with her, and he said, "Don't take that personally." And I was thinking about the Four Agreements. Have you ever read the Four Agreements?
Sure, Don Miguel.
Yeah, do you remember
It's a
which
classic.
one I'm speaking about? Which one of those agreements? He said,
I don't know.
I don't want to give you a test here on the air. But one of the agreements was, don't take anything personally. you know? And I was just thinking about what Don Miguel had said in that book about not taking things personally, because so often when we encounter someone who's what we might consider rude or unpleasant or unhappy or whatever it is, the first thing that we want to do is just take it personally, say, she has no right to talk to me like that, and how dare you, and I'm going to get in, I'm going to find out what's going on, and, or whatever it might, or just go around in a morose kind of way. And it's like, it's what I'm talking about, even when I'm talking about watching that movie and being a different person watching that movie, or reading the life and teachings of the Masters of the Far East 25 years after I purchased it, and having it have something totally new for me. And my reaction to this woman talking in this fashion to me just an hour ago or so was very different than it was even for me even a decade or so, or maybe even a few months ago, before I immersed myself in preparation for this seminar that I'm going to be doing on the 24th and 25th of this month, called I Am Light. That I reminded myself that I am light, and that when you have a choice to be right or to be kind, that it's really important to be able to choose kind. And so rather than being right and saying, well, how dare anybody talk to me like that? And I have, I didn't do anything to her, and she's just, instead my immediate reaction was to push that kind of, subconscious mind training that I've had, over the years, to react with hostility or hurt or pain or frustration or whatever, whenever you encounter what you might consider to be unpleasant or rude behavior in something, is to come from a place of kindness. And I was just thinking to myself how happy I was in the last hour that I didn't walk around wondering and being hurt by and being upset, but instead was just thinking about this woman and just trying to send her as much love as I possibly can, and hope that whatever it is that would motivate her to react in that way to an attempted act of kindness, that it gets soothed and it gets happy, and that she becomes happy. And I think if I send energy to her, that would be it just represents a kind of growth thing for me as a person. And if we can, as I speak to all of you out there all over the world, when you encounter any kind of behavior that don't be one of those kind of people who's looking for an occasion to be offended, and consequently then be emotionally upset, and then consequently attract more of what you don't want in your life. And I think that's the essence of what Abraham was speaking to me about in this new product that we have, this book and DVD and CD called Co-Creating at Its Best, that you want the law of attraction is always working. And if you put your thoughts on what you don't like or what you're unhappy about or what makes you angry, then you're going to align with an energy that is going to offer you experiences that match up to exactly what it is that you're thinking, so that every moment of your life, regardless of what it is that's coming at you, you have a choice. And this woman, for me, was a great reminder that I'm growing, and that I can be applying this not just in this kind of an event, but I can be applying it in all kinds of places all over my world, including all of the negativity and things that are taking place. For example, what is taking place in Paris over the weekend at the satirical, at Charlie Hebdo, is that how you say it?
Hebdo.
And what was going on, and to not fill my heart and my head with all kinds of antipathy and vituperative thoughts about all the Muslims in the world and being angry at them, as I'm hearing so many people, and instead just working at we're never going to solve these problems of anger and hostility, which in a personal way show up in the event that I had when trying to help a woman with her luggage, but when they're extended into a larger and larger perspective, and the solution is going to be in finding a place where all of us can send love, where our hearts are so filled with rage and hate toward so many people.
And while I don't think that it's very possible for most of us to ever completely get rid of this ego,
as long as we're incarnated into a human form, I do believe that it is possible for us to tame it and to make it less of a dominant force in our lives by no longer having such a important role placed on being right and making other people wrong. One of the ways to begin to work at treasuring your divinity is to practice being kind rather than being right in as many occasions as you possibly can. And you'll have lots of opportunities to do this on a daily basis. Thousands of them show up in little tiny interactions in virtually every place you go, with strangers, with your children, with your spouses, on the telephone, ordering something in a restaurant, whatever. There's always this part of us that is the ego that wants to be right, that wants to make the dust rise from the earth with your swagger. And after a while, you start noticing it. You start observing it. As your own ego becomes less and less of a dominant force in your life, you start to notice how much other people's ego is playing such a role, how much strutting there is, how much posturing there is, how much bragging takes place. You can see it in body language. You can see it in the way that people deal with each other. You can see it in lines at the grocery store. You can see it when you're trying to get your ticket straightened out at the airport, whatever it might be. There's this placing somebody else in a position of inferiority, and you are here to do this for me, and I'm more important than. And it isn't said that way, but it's sort of communicated. And you think to yourself that all of these people, I do it all the time, all of these people are nothing more than me in an earlier time in my life. That this is the way I was. I see it in my past relationships. I see it in the way that I dealt with my children years ago and the way that I deal with them now. I see it in noticing that it's easier now for me to be kind and to suspend being right. And I'm right almost all the time. But I no longer need to point it out, except for right now, of course. But the idea that even if you know that when you're talking to someone that they're completely wrong, if you can suspend the need to point it out and instead just say something kind back in response. If you can just practice doing that wherever you are, those are points towards treasuring your divinity. It's not about worshiping more. It's not about getting down on your knees and practicing somebody else's orthodoxy. It's not about fitting in. It's not about memorizing verses out of the Bible or the Quran or the Torah or whatever. It's not about that. It's about practicing being Christ-like rather than Christian. It's about practicing being Buddha-like rather than Buddhist. It's about practicing being Muhammad-like rather than Muslim. Muhammad said, don't even harm any tree that has a green leaf growing on it. If there's a green leaf growing on it, don't harm it. Practice that. That kind of love and admiration for humanity. Live as much as you can those principles. And all it amounts to is simply beginning a process of moving out of the lowest levels of consciousness. The lowest level of consciousness is ego consciousness. Ego, some have suggested EGO, is an acronym for edging God out. That as you edge God out of your life, what you have done is you have separated yourself from your divinity, believed that you are those 6 things, separate from everyone, separate from what you would like to attract into your life, separate from God, your reputation. You start believing that this is who you are, and you start living this way, and you look upon your divinity as something that is out there that you'll see, you'll talk to on at the synagogue on Saturday or at church on Sunday morning or whatever. And you'll practice during certain days, like we call, at the end of the year, 30 days of fasting, and this makes me, closer to God and so on. To me, it's about applying the principles of moving past ego consciousness. And when I see conflicts between one group and another, men versus women, when I see conflicts between people who are older and people who are younger, when you see conflicts existing between people who have one color skin and a different color of skin, when you see conflicts between people who wear a robe versus those who wear a yarmulke, when you see all of these divisions, and there are just endless numbers of them that we pigeonhole ourselves into, they are still the cause of virtually all conflicts on the planet. We still are dividing ourselves. We don't understand that this is a round planet, and on a round planet, there's no choosing up sides. There are no sides.